Startups, whether NFT funded or otherwise, have a bad habit of making things look better than they are. NFT startups are particularly guilty of this, perhaps because most of them don't have anything to show, so they have to throw up the smoke and mirrors to keep people interested. What if there was a tool to just cut straight through all that nonsense and get to the heart of the business? Say hello to The Loop. Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Tenner, aka Swombat, and in these videos I use my 15 years of experience as a successful entrepreneur working with hundreds of tech startup founders to bring some clarity to Web3 and NFTs. Also, this video is sponsored by Zen Academy, which is Zenika's community, where he's gathering good people from all around the world to learn and succeed together. There's no exchange of money, but we get along well and we're both trying to help people understand NFTs better, so we decided, why not talk about each other more? It would be easy to make this about the founders and accuse them of being unethical. And perhaps there's a case for that, but before we get into it, I want to point out that even if the founders are making things look more rosy than they are, that's not necessarily because they're trying to lie or manipulate people. There are two factors that push founders into this. The first is that often founders themselves are naive and deluded about how badly their business is doing. This is not pointing any fingers. Many founders tie their identity into their business. I did. When your identity is wrapped up in your business, it feels like an extension of you, almost like your child. And you end up with a strong bias against hearing information that tells you that your brainchild is dying. Founders are often operating in a reality distortion field of their own making, which is usually necessary for them to keep going when things get tough. That's because startups are an emotional roller coaster, and I think few people have the emotional fortitude to make it through that without some delusions. The other factor is that our culture is still not very tolerant of failure, or even of people admitting weakness and the possibility of failure. Because of that, many founders are afraid to admit the truth, whether in person or on social media. If their business is struggling, they will instead want to present a face of, yeah, sure, we're having some challenges because everyone does, but we're definitely gonna make it, rather than admit weakness. On top of it, our culture, globally and also in NFTs, tends to quickly turn away and move on when something doesn't seem to be working. To an NFT project, this sort of attention drop is a brutal punishment. So founders have a strong rationale, both emotional and practical, to keep their problems hidden. And it's rare for them to feel like they're able to be transparent about real problems, even the good ones who aren't compulsive liars. But as investors, we need to be able to see through that. And if you're a founder and watching this, maybe this can help you cut through your own bullshit, and might even save your business in the process. The essence of this tool is to start to see businesses as what they are. Processes that turn things into other things. Namely, successful businesses turn a smaller amount of money into a larger amount of money. For most people, businesses seem huge and overwhelming and complicated. Most business people suck at making things look simple, probably because they benefit from creating this perception of complexity. It makes them look smarter. But actually, businesses are really simple. Those of us who have built businesses from scratch, though, understand that they're not all that complicated. Every business is subject to the loop, and the loop is really simple. It only has 3 steps. Step 1 is to make something of value. Step 2 is to get that thing of value in front of a customer. And step 3 is to get paid for that thing of value. That's it, just 3 simple steps. I have yet to find a viable business that isn't subject to this basic law of the loop. It's as unavoidable as the law of gravity. If you somehow have found such a physics-defying business though, and if it has actually managed to pull that off for a long enough period to be considered sustainable, please mention it in the comments. I'd be really curious to hear about it. As a business grows, it tends to add a lot of extra stuff around the loop. Eventually, you end up with businesses that are so bloated that even the people working there don't really understand what the loop of that business might be. The loop isn't about purpose or mission or grandiose things. It's very basic. It's the heart of the business, its arteries and its veins. If the loop isn't working, the business runs out of money and dies. If people working in the business don't understand the loop, they'll probably end up doing things that harm it instead of speeding it up. The more that the loop gets obstructed, the less the chances that the business will survive. Let's zoom back into startups. With startups, NFT or not, the loop rules all. Startups that survive do so because they focus every single resource they have onto creating the loop. It is the first commandment of creating a new viable business. Get the loop going. Make something of value, get it to a customer, and crucially, get paid. So how can we use this to evaluate NFT projects? In previous videos, I've said to look for the product when evaluating NFT startups, and that still holds. The loop is equally important if you want to understand the risks of an investment. Startups are almost by definition businesses that haven't yet built the loop. Some haven't figured out a sales model that works. Others are still trying to understand who their customers are. Some don't even know what it is that they're making that might be of value. So when looking at a project, ask yourself, have they figured out a thing of value that they can make and sell for money to customers? At this point in time, sadly, most NFT projects fail at this very first step. Without something of value being created, evaluated? There is no loop, so the progress is 0. Next, have they got that thing of value in front of people who actually consider it valuable? That's really simple to figure out. Are there actually people receiving that value, whether it's a service or a product or something else? If not, does the project even know who those people might be? You can ask questions about that. How far along are they in figuring this out? Because build a better mousetrap is a myth. We live in a busy world with many things fighting for our attention. And if you don't even know who you want to reach, they probably won't hear about you. And finally, are they getting paid? This is the most important step, but one that hesitant first-time founders often leave to last, even though they really shouldn't. But ironically, until the payment is made, 99% of the risk is still there. Everything before this step is conjecture. We think this thing is of value. We think these people are our customers. But once the customer pays for something, they've validated the whole loop. And finally, all those speculations turn into realities. That's why experienced founders often sell the product before it's even built, and then go backwards through the loop to get it built and delivered. The loop is not all that there is to a successful business, of course. There are all sorts of considerations around profitability, scaling, competition, and so on that can also prevent a business from succeeding. But the loop is the heart and blood vessels, and without it, nothing else matters. Because this is the NFT space, I think it's worth repeating yet again, investors looking to sell the NFT on to another investor for more do not count as part of this loop. To stretch our heart analogy a bit further, investors are providing more blood to go around the circulatory system. If you don't have a heart and arteries, pumping in more blood might keep you alive for a bit, but it won't save you, at least not for long. So if you're evaluating a project and the main purpose of customers when buying the product is to make a profit selling it to someone else, then my suggestion is to discount that entirely and assume that there is currently no loop and possibly nothing of value being created or even planned. If you're a founder, the loop should help you to focus your resources on the things that matter most to get your business off the ground and ensure its survival. Until the loop is closed, anything that helps that happen should probably be on the top of your priority list. And anything that doesn't, like a big partnership talk or some hype building, is just a distraction, no matter how shiny it looks. So you should probably dismiss it and refocus. If you're an investor, understanding how far along your project is in building the loop and also evaluating whether the founders even understand that they need to build the loop will help you to better assess the risk level of the project. And as you observe a project over time, try to keep track of how much progress they're making towards closing the loop, if any. That's the only delivery metric that actually matters. Not hype, not tweets, not partnerships, just creating stuff that has value, delivering it to people who want that value, and getting paid. That said, it's not as simple as saying, the project is close to completing the loop, so they're less risky, I'll buy now. It also depends on the pricing of the NFTs at that point. If the project is massively overvalued, for example, and then starts closing the loop, there is a risk that the price will actually collapse instead of rise, as people begin to realize that the actual value of the project is much less than what they were dreaming. That will especially be the case with high-profile projects that are vulnerable to 3 traps that will take their price down massively as they come down to earth, which eventually they all must. Check out this video I made earlier to find out more about the 3 traps that will sink most high-profile projects by 80% or more from their current bear market prices. GM and good luck.